Are you ready to hear what the biggest indicator of being in a destructive relationship is? The number one indicator, the most defining indicator that you might be in a destructive relationship? Confusion. Confusion is the most defining indicator of being in a destructive relationship. And I'm not talking about occasional confusion, I'm talking about chronic confusion. And I'm going to give you a few synonyms just to kind of add layers to what it is. It's feeling uncertain, feeling perplexed, feeling even disoriented. And this is a theme in the relationship. All of us feel confusion sometimes, right? We feel a little confused about why somebody did something or what's happening. But I'm talking about a chronic confusion. Confusion would be one of the emotions or feelings that you have that are predominant in this particular relationship. And it can be with anybody. It can be in a marriage, it can be in a romantic relationship, it could be a parent, an adult child relationship, work, ministry, anywhere. What it feels like is trying to constantly find your footing on ground that's always shifting. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's very much a slow progression. It's slow and insidious and covert. And by covert, I mean it's like an undercurrent. It's very hidden. It's not pronounced. And it happens in little tiny microaggressions over time. And the confusion grows bigger. It doesn't dissipate or get smaller. It actually continues to grow into a bigger situation. So it typically starts with this feeling that something's off. You can't quite put your finger on it, but it's a feeling that something is off, something is not quite right. And I'm going to try to describe by using a few word pictures to really get the level of confusion across. It will feel a lot like you are constantly decoding every situation, every interaction. So much of your bandwidth is going into just trying to understand things that don't make sense. You'll be trying to decode their tone, the meaning of what they're doing, the motive behind what happened. It feels a lot like you're putting together a puzzle, but you don't actually have all the pieces. They're withholding some of the pieces of the puzzle, and intentionally so. It can feel a little bit like you're walking through a fog, like everything is just a little foggy. And your internal dialogue will be a lot like, maybe I misunderstood. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I didn't remember it right. Maybe I'm the problem. Does this sound familiar? This is what chronic confusion in a relationship looks like, and it's typically that indicator that there's something going on that you don't know about. So if something feels off, probably it's because something is off. And I want to give a little bit of insight into the why. So why is the confusion there? Well, part of it's because if you have a relationship with someone, and again, it could be anyone, when you have a relationship with them, and I'm going to use a parent as an example. So a parent should be trustworthy, but they're not. Or they should feel safe, but you don't. And same thing for a marriage. I should feel safe in this relationship, but I don't. I should be able to trust this person, but for some reason I can't. That creates a lot of confusion. That's cognitive dissonance. There's a gap between the reality and what should be, or what you believe should be. There's a lot of confusion in destructive relationships because there's typically deception. Deception is somewhere woven into the relationship, and it might be that there's overt deception going on or just withholding information. Manipulation is another form of deception in destructive relationships. It's where words and actions don't match. I'm saying I'm sorry, but I'm not acting like I'm sorry. I'm saying I'm going to change, but I'm not actually changing. Another reason it gets very confusing is because there's a lot of intermittent reinforcement. It's, we're really close and things are going really well, and then all of a sudden they're not going well. And it's these drastic shifts. They're pouring a lot of love and attention in, and then they're totally out again. These sorts of things create a great deal of confusion. And when there's a lot of confusion, you've lost your sense of safety, you've lost a sense of consistency, and that creates a lot of confusion. Now, let's talk a little bit about what all of this confusion is costing you, because there's a pretty big impact to living in a chronic state of confusion. So, the first thing that it's costing you is your ability to trust your own judgment. So, it erodes this sense of reality in your perception of it. And because the circumstances or this person is creating so much confusion, you're thinking that you're just not interpreting it, you're not understanding it, like something inside of you. So when it starts to erode your sense of reality or your perception, you have a hard time trusting your own judgment. Decision making starts to go out the window. Now it's hard to make decisions. I can't make decisions, or I can't take action on what is happening because I feel so confused. It really renders us unable to move in one direction or another. And it also doesn't feel good to not trust your own compass, to think that your judgment's off or your perception's off. It turns eventually inward. What happens is, over time, it's not that the situation is confusing or the person is creating confusion. We begin to turn it inward, and we're like, I'm the source. I'm the one that's creating the confusion. I'm confused. It's inside of me. And then as soon as that begins to happen, now our own worth is starting to get eroded in that process as well. Now I feel like, how do I not understand what's going on? Why am I so confused? What does that mean about me? I'm not smart, or I'm not a communicator, or it's just turning it inward. And it feels awful, because now you've got this outside confusion, you've got this inside critic, and there's no escaping it. The other thing that I want to talk about is the exhaustion. It takes such a toll. When you're spending all of your time trying to decode situations, make sense of things, you're probably even, in all honesty, you're digging for answers. Maybe you're checking phones, or you're trying to go back and look at text messages, or you're trying to recall the conversation that you know you had, but the other person is denying that the conversation had happened, or that they said certain things. So much of your bandwidth, your resources get drained into this puzzle that has missing pieces, but you don't know it yet. So you're trying to put it all together. All right, now the $1,000,000 question. Why on earth would anyone do this? Why would anyone intentionally create confusion? I'm going to give you two reasons, and stay with me because we're going to unpack it a little bit. The two reasons are, they're trying to maintain control over the relationship, and they're trying to avoid accountability. Okay, so I'm going to put those two things out there, and now let's unpack it a little bit. So if you're in a state of confusion, they're in control over the relationship. Remember, we talked about how confusion renders us unable to take action. It causes so much confusion between who the person is saying they are and who they are in the way that they're behaving. There's a huge gap there. And so when all that confusion is coming in, now they're in control. You're not making decisions. You're having a hard time making a decision, taking action, and moving in one direction or another, because you don't have all of the truth in order to do that. Why don't you have all of the truth? Because they're withholding it. Remember, there's pieces of the puzzle in their pocket that they're not putting on the table, and they're doing that intentionally. Because the truth is, in John, it says, people don't come into the light because they love the darkness. So whatever they're trying to hide or keep from you knowing, that's an intentional choice they don't want you to make a decision about the relationship based on the truth, and that's why they're creating the smokescreen. And then the avoiding accountability kind of layers in with that. When we talk about manipulation, the words and the actions not matching, so it'll be, I'm going to say I'm sorry, and I'm going to really emphasize that, but I'm not actually going to behave in a way that shows that I'm sorry or that I'm truly repentant. I'm going to tell you I love you so much. You mean so much to me, but I'm not actually treating you in a loving way, not consistently so. And so now they're avoiding accountability, or the gaslighting too. That creates a lot of confusion. So you're like, well, this happened, you said this, and then you did this. Well, they're just not even going to own it. They're going to be like, I don't know what you're talking about. And you sound crazy. That's gaslighting. That's creating confusion. And that's so that they can avoid accountability in order to maintain control over the relationship. And I know that sounds dark and sinister, and it is. It is. It is quite literally the kind of behavior, and this is going to sound like really harsh language too, that the Bible calls evil, or refers to people who are behaving in an evil way. All right. The next thing I want to just quickly talk about is the contrast between healthy and destructive relationships. So confusion does exist in even healthy relationships, but it moves towards clarity, versus in an unhealthy relationship, the confusion just grows and gets bigger and bigger. And so in a healthy relationship, confusion is addressed with communication, and then the confusion dissipates because truth is valued by both people. Accountability is valued by both people. But in a destructive relationship, truth gets distorted again in order to avoid accountability and to maintain control over the relationship. So inconsistencies just don't get explained. And then when you ask for the truth, it can get flipped and turned into attacks on you. You're too sensitive. You aren't remembering right. You misunderstood. But it's all in an effort to dodge the accountability. When we look at this through a spiritual lens, a heart that is aligned with God's is very interested in the truth. It's very interested in wanting to create clarity for the other person in the relationship, because the heart is going to be just very other centered. Whereas a heart that's not aligned with God's heart is very much interested in creating chaos and confusion in order to keep whatever they're trying to keep hidden. So they're keeping it away from you, they're withholding information, and it does create a lot of confusion. So keep that in mind, the spiritual aspect. Now, in my own destructive relationship, there are a few things that if I could go back, I would do differently. And so I'm going to give those things to you. These are the very things that I give my clients when I meet with them online for relationship recovery coaching. And it is this: when you feel the confusion, notice the confusion. So quickly, we want to move, because confusion is very uncomfortable. We want to move to addressing the confusion by trying to get information or putting together the puzzle that you can't because there's pieces missing, or decoding a situation. And what I would say is just notice the confusion. If you are feeling chronically confused, recognize that as something else is going on, and you don't have to put all your energy into trying to figure out what that is. The fact that you are noticing that you are chronically confused in your relationship is enough. I would also encourage you to find your safe people. Here's the situation: there is a high correlation between shame and betrayals in significant relationships. And so what happens is, when we feel shame, we kind of withdraw and pull back, and we're not telling people or talking with people about what's going on. I can personally attest to this, but I would encourage you to find your safe people, the wise counsel that will speak into your life, your safe people that will give you honest feedback about situations that are going on. And then the other thing that I want to say is, when we get so focused in the weeds in a specific event, where we're so narrow focused into what that event is and trying to decode it, but I would encourage you, pan out so that you can see the big picture, because what you want to look for are patterns. If you're feeling chronically confused, there are patterns, but we get so focused in on trying to figure it out that we're not panning out and we're not looking at the big picture, and in that we're missing quite a bit. I hope that helps understanding confusion in destructive relationships, and with a little bit of a spiritual slant on it. Additionally, in the description, there's going to be some links to some articles on confusion and other resources.